If you go on the internet right now and you Google best passports in the world, you're probably going to find a bunch of different lists, and they're all going to be really similar, and they're pretty much going to rank whoever's on top as whoever has the most visa-free access. So at this moment, as I'm shooting this video, it's probably going to be Singapore, the UAE, and a bunch of European countries. And don't get me wrong, visa-free access is really important, but if all you want to do is travel for the rest of your life, maybe that's the only thing you should consider. But most people, that's not the only thing they want to do. They also want to live in a good country and be safe, and maybe they want to move and they want to be safe as they travel. And obviously those are all very relevant things, and those are things that your passport can also help you with, but mostly in those rankings, except for some exceptions to that, to try to be a little more global in what they approach and what they consider. They're mostly really limited. And so I wanted to talk to you about exactly this. Besides visa-free access, what should you consider in your passport? And of course, if you are just wanting a visa-free access passport, go for Singapore, go for UAE, go for Italy, Spain, France, and Germany, and you're probably going to have the best passport in the world. It isn't even that likely that it's going to change anytime soon. So there you go, you can close the video, and if that's all you want, you've got it. But there are some other considerations. I've written them down, and we're going to talk about them. The second thing, besides visa-free access, that you should probably consider is your country perception. One example I like to give is Canada and the US. If you see their visa-free access, honestly, it's pretty much the same. Canada might have one or two extra countries, but that'll be it. Whereas the US also has a pretty good passport. But if you travel as an American, you're going to be teased a lot, to say the least. And you're obviously more at risk for violence, for terrorism, for crime directed against you, specifically because you're American. And that's because being American in and of itself is very controversial. The US is a controversial country, whether you like it or not. And so between two passports that have exactly the same visa-free access, you could actually prefer to pick the Canadian one over the American one, just for the safe and for the relaxation of knowing that when you go abroad, people are going to be just overall much nicer to you, and you're going to be less exposed to crime. So country perception is definitely one thing that you should also consider. The third thing you should consider is the freedom of movement. So for example, if you are Singaporean, Singapore has the strongest passport in the world in terms of visa-free access. But guess what? It only allows you to live in one single city in the whole wide world, which is Singapore. And it's a really good city, a really nice city. But if you don't want to live there the rest of your life, and if you want to have at least a little bit of flexibility as to where you're moving without having necessity for a visa, then a Singaporean passport, especially since it doesn't allow for double nationality, that is for multiple citizenships, is something that might not be for you. Maybe a permanent residency in Singapore might be more interesting, whereas you can keep some other country's passport for travel or for freedom of movement or that sort of thing. So that's definitely one thing you should consider as well. On the other hand, if you're, for example, a citizen of the UK or a citizen of Ireland, you can also see that contrast. So in the UK, if you're a citizen of the UK, you can live pretty much in the UK, in Ireland, and in a few other islands that are controlled by the UK. But after Brexit, UK citizens have not been allowed to just move freely into Europe. Whereas like a citizen of Ireland, not only can they also live in the UK, and they also can live in most of the islands that British people can, but they also can live in Ireland and anywhere else in the EU, which is something that can't be said about UK citizens anymore. And so obviously between those two passports, even though they have virtually exactly the same visa-free access in terms of travel, being Irish might be much more interesting for you if freedom of movement is something that you actually care about. Another consideration is labor privileges. So as I said, an Italian passport, a German passport, a Spanish passport, those are some of the best passports in the world, and they're even slightly better than the American passport. But if you're trying to grow in your career and you have a job in technology or in finance, or honestly in most well-paid fields, if you have an American passport, that means you can work in the US, and working in the US at the same position, same job, sometimes even the same company, you're going to get paid 2, 3, maybe 4 times more. And that is a lot of money that you're leaving on the table by not working in the US. And it might not be your priority, it might be something that you don't really care about, but if you care about money, if you care about job opportunities, if you care about growing in your career, then the US passport is hard to beat. Another example that I like to give is, let's compare, for example, a citizen of Austria and a citizen of Switzerland. When you look at it in general, you should probably consider the two passports pretty similar. They have virtually the same visa-free access. They both allow you to live and work anywhere in Switzerland, in the EU, in Norway, in Iceland. And so you might say, oh, that doesn't really make a difference. But it isn't exactly true, because Switzerland is not actually part of the EU. And that means that it allows, its government is allowed to differentiate between EU citizens and Swiss citizens. So if a Swiss citizen goes to Austria and they look for a job, they're going to have exactly the same rights and the same preferences as an Austrian citizen. A company will not have to prioritize the Austrian citizen over the Swiss citizen. But if an Austrian goes to Switzerland, that's not how it works. In Switzerland, the government insists that companies prefer Swiss citizens and then EU citizens and then third nationals. So whereas the Austrian will definitely have an advantage in Switzerland over a citizen of, let's say, Egypt or the US or Brazil, they're still going to be quote-unquote second-class citizens when compared to the Swiss. That's obviously something that you should also consider when you're deciding which passport is better for you. Another consideration is the ease of naturalization. So even within Europe, if you go to Italy, Austria, Switzerland, it's going to take you more than 10 years to naturalize. Those are very strict countries when it comes to nationality, and especially in Switzerland, there might even be a vote on whether you actually deserve to become a citizen or not. It's definitely a very complicated thing, and I know plenty of people who've lived in Switzerland their whole lives, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and they actually don't possess Swiss nationality. So it's definitely complicated. Whereas other countries that are right next door that have a similar visa-free access, for example, Portugal or Ireland or Germany, they have much less strict process of naturalization, where in all three of them you only have to live there for 5 years instead of 10, which is significantly different if you want to become a citizen and become integrated in the culture much quicker. So that's also something you should consider. Obviously, there's other types of visas as well. That's something I see most people ignore. So as an example, I have an Italian passport and I am here in Australia right now on a visa with my Italian passport. That's the 417. That's a working holiday visa, and it's a very good visa. But if I was Spanish or if I were Portuguese, I would not have access to that visa, even though they're also part of the EU. They have the same visa-free access in terms of tourism. They cannot apply for the 417. Instead, they can apply for the other working holiday, which I believe is 468 or 461. Don't quote me on that. And their working holiday is much more limited than mine, let's say. So they have to have gone to college for at least 2 years. They have to have an English test. They have quotas for their working holidays. So whereas I could just apply and get the visa in 5 minutes, maybe theirs will take a couple of days and they'll have more requirements, etc. And also there are countries that don't even have working holiday arrangements with Australia. So if you're only looking at visa-free access in terms of tourism, it might be that two countries are the same, but if one country has a better visa for what you're looking for, it might be more interesting to have that passport over some other one. And another example is Australia, the US, Canada, and Mexico. I'll give you a few examples. Like I said, the US is one of the most interesting countries to work in the world. You pretty much paid double or triple what you would be paid pretty much anywhere else except maybe Switzerland. And so a lot of people want to work in the US, but it's really hard to get a visa to work in the US, except maybe if you're part of NAFTA, because if you're a Mexican or a Canadian citizen, especially if you're a Canadian citizen, it's much easier for you to move down to the US and work, because the requirements for the special categories that NAFTA citizens are allowed are much less stringent. And so as a Canadian, it's much more realistic for you to go and move to the US and live in the US than, let's say, as an Italian, even though in terms of visa-free access and in virtually all passport indexes, the Italian passport is going to be ranked higher than the Canadian passport. Another example of another arrangement is Australia and the US. So Australia has a special visa that only Australians have. It's called the E3 visa. You can Google it up. And it has a quota of like 10,000 people, Australians, that can move every year to the US for work. The thing is that quota is never really filled up. And so what that means is that as an Australian, you pretty much have the privilege of being one of the nationalities that can move to the US the easiest, as long as you have an employee that's willing to sponsor you. And so you see that, for example, Australians have that, but citizens of New Zealand don't have that. And so two countries, very similar perception, honestly similar in everything. Citizens of New Zealand can live in Australia. Citizens of Australia can live in New Zealand. So they're clearly very similar countries. But if you want to move to the US, it's better that you are Australian than that you are Kiwi. So those are also some things that you should consider. Last but not least, obviously, there's linked obligations. If you're Singaporean, if you're Swiss, you have to serve the military, and that isn't exactly something that everyone might be inclined to do. Another example that's very famous around is that if you're American, no matter where you live, no matter how long ago you left the US, or even if you ever lived in the US, you still have to file all your taxes. And even though you might not have to pay any taxes to the US because there's a lot of foreign income exclusions, that sort of thing, you're definitely still having to file your taxes. And it is a costly and very painful, not painful, but annoying process, let's call it that. And so when you consider all of those situations, what you're going to notice is that there are better passwords and worse passwords, but there is the best password for you, and it's probably not the best password for me. And all those criteria have to be analyzed when you're choosing where to move or which password you should try to get. And it's much more complicated than just looking at Singapore, seeing that it can let you travel anywhere in the world. I mean, like, okay, that's the passport I want. It might be, but it also might not. One other linked obligation that I haven't talked about yet is that, for example, if you're Austrian, if you're Dutch, if you're Singaporean, if you want to naturalize into any of those countries, you're probably going to have to renounce every other citizenship you have. Whereas, like, if you naturalize in the US or in Switzerland or in Italy or in Portugal or in Australia, for example, you don't have to renounce all your other citizenships. And of course, imagine, as I said, there's virtually no passport that has it all. No passport has freedom of movement and good perception just across the board. Some passports are stronger than others, but the great key here is to be able to combine passports to get multiple different benefits that you wouldn't be getting from a single one. And so even though Singapore, Austria are pretty much top-notch countries that offer you a really great passport, it might not be worth it for you to get their passport because you might have to renounce another passport that gives you something that you previously didn't have. So I hope you guys see that it's more of a nuance, it's more of a detailed kind of thing. If you like country, travel, that kind of vibe, you should consider subscribing, watching a few other videos because you're probably going to like them. And I'll see you guys around.